Budgie and Horslips, two super cool, super great bands that never really made it into the mainstream or the massive consciousness, which is on one hand it's a pity. On the other hand, no one can make it to the top, and unfortunately that's part of the world and part of existence. But this in this case, these two bands really deserve, at least in my opinion, a little bit more recognition, a little bit more respect. And in fact, in the among the people who really care and know music, they are pretty well respected. I think that their problems were for Budgie is that they were never really quite as good or as great as Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, and let's just say in the next generation, Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. And in the case of Horslips, in their times, people didn't really care about that kind of music, meaning blending in or being more. Actually, this is way more than blending and being based firmly in popular in folk music. I meant to say. So it's Irish folk, very firmly planted into Irish folk with some rock. So I would say, even though such things did exist, but I think that to that extent, to be really based in a folk music and especially in specific countries, folk music and lore was relatively new or very new, and their entire existence was based on that for the most part. And the reason I pair them because there are many similarities. They were active between roughly 70 and 80, and then they just faded away, and they banged out a number of albums, each one, as we shall see. Budgie was founded by Burke Shelley, who was very often compared to Geddy Lee. Again, this is a pretty superficial comparison, but they kind of looked alike. They have the big glasses, the big nose, being the bass player, and the singer. The singing style has some similarities, both kind of shrieky, high-pitched voice, and they're both the band leaders of their respective bands. But that's pretty much where the similarities end. Very different approach to the bass, very different approach to music. And a lot of people describe Budgie as some sort of fusion between Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, and Rush, and it's not untrue. So if you want to imagine something like that, it's pretty accurate. I would say 40-40 for Black Sabbath and Judas Priest, and to be a little bit more precise, early Sabbath and early Priest, and then later on they very much had their own style, and then the remaining 20% is kind of Rush. They were never as progressive or as intricate as Rush were, but they did have that style or that mentality, let's just say, in their music. Unfortunately, I don't have their records. Yeah, I do have two here. But Horslips, I have almost the entire series. Budgie had an album out before Horslips, so we're going to start with them, and that's 1971 with the self-titled Budgie. Very cool, interesting record. Definitely worth a listen, even for those who are not big fans. Starts out with Guts, a very riffy song, and then they go into Everything in My Heart, which they did in a lot of albums, maybe even most of their albums. They're kind of super slow and quiet and interesting, weird, not weird in a bad way, but weird in a sense that unusual and unexpected. The author, another thumper, nude disintegrating parachutist woman. They have all of their titles are kind of like jokes and all kinds of, as you shall see, all kind of funny titles. Hot as Docker's armpit and In the Grip of a Tire Fitter's Hand. All kind of kooky things that you would not expect. The first record has a little bit of bluesy flair. Imagine kind of sort of first two records of Priest, first two records of Sabbath, maybe half of a degree less in the heaviness. Bass very prominent. The first thing that you hear when you hear this record and the next two is like a super melodic bass. So not like typical rock or metal bands. You would hear more like in these funk, Motown, pop, where the bass is kind of almost a prominent instrument, right? Kind of going with the melody, very melodic bass. Bass almost kind of like a Lemmy-ish bass in a way, very much with the melody. So not so much with the rhythm, very much with the melody. And of course, when the guitar has a solo, then you can hear the bass melody underneath. Homicidal, Suicidal, the closing song is a great song. So definitely worth a listen. Very special record in my opinion, as is the second one, 1972, Bring Us to Squawk. Opening with Whiskey River, that has nothing to do with the Willie Nelson song by the title. And I thought, or maybe I still think, that there was an older Delta blues song, but that might not be the title. Maybe it's just mentioned in it, Whiskey River. Again, Rolling Home Again, Make Me Happy, Hot as a Doctor's Armpit, Drugstore Woman, Bottled, Stranded. Great that they have a tendency to do that, to make like a real fast, hard thumper. And their riffing is also pretty interesting. It's like you would think kind of like a proto metal, not as hard, not as harsh as let's just say Priest and Sabbath. More melodic, more airy, not as much as let's just say AC/DC, but a little bit in that. So they give you a break. They let you breathe. So it's not just da 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 continuously all of the time. And another great characteristic of the first three records is their drum. Their drum, he's really not hitting them. So this is not a Cozy Powell style here. This is not a Ian Paice, Scott Travis kind of drumming. This is more like a Joe Bouchard, almost delicate, almost finesse, almost have a jazzy flair to it. And this brings us to the next record, Never Turn Your Back on a Friend. Probably, at least in my opinion, the best of these three. So these are considered like the classic Budgie records very often. The classic lineup, it was the same lineup. It was Shelley, it was Ray Phillips on the drum, and Tony Borge on guitars. You're the biggest thing since Powdered Milk. Great song with a drum solo in it. There's an extended, like super melodic and guitar solo in different parts. They kind of stop, and then like a quasi bass solo. Not really a bass solo, but there's like a bass section kind of coming out after the drum solo. So very cool. And the Rip of a Tire Fitter's Hand that I mentioned to your parents is the big song here, Riding My Nightmare. And this one has a song, Bradford. That's the opening song. Like everybody's going crazy for that song. I think that other songs are way better in it, but it is a great song. It has like a super cool riff, and like I said, with the bass in it and with this drum, it's just really perfect. And then the second song of the album is the classic Baby Please Don't Go, that was written originally by Big Joe Williams, who was a sort of a bridge, late Delta blues, almost going into Chicago blues, never got his due, another one. And that song was made famous by Muddy Waters, and many others covered it, including AC/DC. In my opinion, this one is the single best version ever. It's just amazing. It beats everybody, the way they made the riff, they made the melody, and with the drums going on, and the bass, the best. Oh, it starts kind of like with the bass intro. Incredible in my opinion, the single best recorded version of this song, including the original, including Muddy Waters and AC/DC. No disrespect to those guys, but this one just hit the nail on the head. Amazing. And here ends the first phase, let's just say, of the Budgie. Like Budgie at its budgiest, and also the lineup would change. They would get a new drummer. And before I continue with Budgie, let me go on to Horslips. Horslips also has this kind of a little bit humorous side to them. These guys were not going to have a musical career. They met, I think, either at a college or they were already working, or part of them were in a college and part were working. They worked for something like an advertisement company or a marketing company, and they met in some setting and they figured out that they liked the same music, so they decided that they would have a bona fide band. And so they agreed on the kind of music that they would do. And the first record that they released is this one, Happy to Meet, Sorry to Part. As you can see, this is an octagonal record jacket or sleeve. Very interesting, very unusual. And this is, by the way, the American version. They have like a little bit cooler version, which was released in their original native Ireland. It's not much different, but you can see the label is definitely different, and the front sleeve also has, I think, a little bit more texture here. But really a cool record. Well, the funny thing is that when you take it out, like pull it out from the shelf, it looks so small just because the corners are cut. It's really insane, but very interesting nonetheless. And this opens like a book a little bit. There are pages here. And the interesting thing is that Horslips owned their own record company from the onset. So the first one who did this idea was not Steve Vai or some other smarter musicians who didn't want to be completely at the mercy of the record company, but they established their own record company, and they also established one for overseas. So I think in Ireland it was called Horslips Records, and in the States and Europe maybe Oatmeal Records or Oat Records, something like that. Anyway, very, very quirky. They make kind of these jokes, these humorous remarks on the end, a little bit making fun of one another. Maybe this one doesn't have one, but it, oh, maybe inside here in the pages they kind of make fun of their drummer, if I'm not mistaken. There's a short little bio of each one, so each one of these paragraphs are of the 5 members. Another cool thing about this band is that they never changed the lineup, so it was the same lineup for the 10 solid years that they were together, maybe less, a little bit less than 10 years. They have their portraits here, so very, very cool, good to have record, but for those of you who don't want to buy it on physical, that's perfectly fine. You can find this on the internet. This is a very, very folkish, very, very Irish band. A record, I mean. They, I think that some of the songs are sung in Irish. Gives a very, very, what they call jigs and reels. So there's one that's called High Reel, The Courageous Lamentation, Unbrock Ban, which is something in Irish, The Mystic Agol, great song, The Shamrock Shore, Flower Among Them All. They're very beautiful. So great record, and in my book this ranks very, very high in their catalog and in my preferences. Their second record is called The Tain, and at least in principle is even more Irish, if you will, than this one, or more traditional. Let me just orient this properly. I hate taking them out with the wrong side. Okay, this is good. And if you will, that's what is typically termed a concept album. I'm not a huge fan of that term, but be it as it may, this is the record, The Tain. Not a huge photo, but it's okay. Follows a little bit in the footsteps of the first one. You have their portraits here, and there is even a printed inner sleeve that explains the story here. And incidentally, the story is very similar or based on the same myth or same lore as Thin Lizzy's Black Rose. So something very, very traditional in the folk traditions of Ireland. And it's a great song. They include the one and only song, where is it? Derek Doom. Here on the bottom, Derek Doom. This is their absolutely the best song ever. It's a super thumping, anthemic, melodic, great song. It's a great song that you can get stuck in your head. You can sing it all the time. You can go out to a bar and have it sung there, or just listen to it at home. Like, this is a super super sort of kind of like in You've Got Another Thing Coming, Breaking the Law, or with Jethro Tull, something like Locomotive Breath, Aqualung, on that level. So think kind of a cross between Locomotive Breath and You Got Another Thing Coming, and you get a good picture. But that's definitely a must listen to. Derek Doom. The big problem of this album, that this is pretty much the only good song on it. There is Time to Kill, there is Chevrolet, where is it here? Chevrolet, but the rest is kind of drawn out, a little bit on the boring side. So they do kind of nice and interesting things on their instrument. What I forgot to tell you right on the onset, that they also play, besides for regular rock instruments, they play a lot of very, very traditional instruments. Harpsichord, violin, all kinds of things that are specific to Ireland. I don't even know what these instruments are called, but there's something like a European version of banjo. Uilleann pipes, flute, whistles, keyboards, bodhrán, that's some sort of a percussion instrument played by the drummer. Charles O'Connor, fiddle. It's not a violin, it's a fiddle. Mandolin, concertina, and vocals. John Effin, guitar, banjo, vocals. Very, very cool record, but it kind of has like a boo-boo on it. If you just want to sit down and listen to it for the first, second, third time, it's okay, but there's a lot of drawn out segments where there's not a hell lot happening. So it's kind of a thorn in this record's side. Next up, why do I have them mixed up here? This doesn't belong here, sorry about that. But anyway, next up is Dance Hall Sweethearts. Front and back, no printed sleeve. This record is cool, but it moves away a little bit from being as traditional oriented, as Irish, as let's just say unquestionably or so firmly set in folk music. So this is a little bit more rocky, and it doesn't work out so well on this record. It's not that it's bad, but they don't really have the expertise, let's just say, or the experience to make regular good rock songs and fuse them with this this kind of traditional folk music. Not a bad record, but a little bit flat. Production is not stellar here, but not terrible either. Pretty much what you would expect from like a regular mediocre band that nobody really cared about in these times. This came out in 74. So the first one, Happy to Meet, is 72, The Taint 73, and this one is 74. Notable songs: Blind Man, great. Oh, King of the Fairies, amazing song. That's also the very, very traditional Irish song, and played in pretty hard rock style. So starts out with a bass intro, and then how does the melody go? I forgot right now. I can't whistle it. But great song, definitely. If there's one song you want to listen out of this record and out of their entire catalog, so that's the main theme of the song. We bring the summer. The blind can lead the blind, so it's kind of like a nice little ballad, mostly vocal. And there's a lot of the instrumentation that kind of gets lost in the production, in my opinion. So this is an okay record, but I think that if you don't necessarily want to complete the entire series, it's not an absolute must. Next up is this, The Unfortunate Cup of Tea, which is in and of itself some sort of folk or mythology motive from the Irish mythology. I don't know if it's directly connected to the story of the Táin with Cuchulainn and the Queen, maybe. But anyway, if if I were just to look at the sleeve and the back sleeve, I would think that this is a parody on some sort of death metal band. But this was released in early '75 when death band was nowhere near existence. This record is their Irishest record, if you will, or let's put it this way, their weirdest record, definitely. Very, very pop, a little disco oriented. I'm not really sure what they wanted to do, but very, very solidly in the Irish folk music. So this record, maybe there is another one, but in my opinion, it's more on this, that they took the most faithful renditions of true Irish folk melodies or dances or music and incorporated it in their music. So not very rocky, pretty poppy, disco-y, if you will, and a little bit of humor and jokes around here. And not a great album, but definitely worth a spin from time to time just to hear that quirkiness, or there is a word that people like to use in the music industry or in the music, or whimsical. It's a very whimsical album. And we're gonna talk about their next album after we go through the next phase of Budgie. So if you remember, the last Budgie record we covered was their third, Never Turn Your Back on a Friend, '73. '74 sees the release of In for the Kill. Kind of a two-faced approach to this record, at least from my perspective. The production is super thick, super low, heavy, not in the song, not in the meaning that it's like heavy metal, but a lot of sound, a lot of the lower register kind of hits you. They have a different drummer, a drummer that in my opinion does not work out as well as their first drummer, Ray Phillips, who left in the meantime. The big songs out of here was, of course, Crash Course in Brain Surgery and In for the Kill. Metallica covered Crash Course in Brain Surgery. I think they also covered actually Brad Fans, so that kind of gave Budgie an edge, especially in the internet age. And I think I mentioned it already in several other videos, or at least one, that with the advent of the internet, you could make the case that the elasticity of time in some way changed, because before the internet you were dependent on fads and fashion and radio. If something wasn't really fashionable, it was difficult to know about it. You had to spend a lot of time in the record store flipping through the records, or know friends who know something until the information got to you. Very often it was lost. So it was difficult to be exposed to things that weren't on the top, in the top 10 or top 20 that you heard all the time being played. But the internet was a game changer. So people wanted to look up, let's just say, this song that Metallica covered. So they just went on the internet, Budgie, hey, ooh, cool band. And really, out of these two bands, between Horslips and Budgie got much more exposure in the internet era. So kind of like a bittersweet situation where they starting to get the respect that they deserve, but unfortunately after the musicians could really reap the tangible profits, at least the money. Now they earn their place, I think, in rock and roll history. Maybe they're not yet where they deserve to be, but way closer than they were before '94 when nobody knew who they were. Just water today, guys. So back to In for the Kill, the quiet song on it, Wondering What Everyone Knows, Living on, or Running From My Soul, great song. Again, the riffing is getting a little bit different than it used to be. It's still the same guitar player, Tony Borge, and he's starting here to do a little bit more usual or more normal riffing, and the bass is going a little to the back, so a little bit less with the melody and more with the rhythm. So that's for In for the Kill. Great record, very dark, very thick production. Good album, great album, but in my opinion it doesn't work as well as the first three. So the drummer left, and I think they were trying a little bit too many things. Obviously you don't want to be repetitive. Good songwriting, good melodies, but I'm not a super big fan of what they're doing with the bass, and they would continue with these tendencies. So Bandolier is the first one that maybe not squarely, but puts them very much closer to normal, let's just say, heavy metal. So here the bass is almost relegated to the work of a regular bassist. It's still higher up in the mix, but it works much closer with the drum and with the rhythm. Now there is another reason for that. It's because they get a new drummer, Steve Williams, who would stay with them for the longest time of all the drummers. I think he stayed almost to the end of their history. Actually, he did. Steve Williams did, yeah, the drums for all of their subsequent records. And a lot of people consider this the most classic lineup. So Burke, Borge, and Williams. And he hits the drums very differently. He's not a Joe Bouchard. He's not a jazz, delicate, soft hitter. He hits them hard. Obviously not as hard as Cozy Powell, but he's definitely a solid rock drummer, much more like Carmine or Vinny, that kind of neighborhood. Maybe a little bit less American flair to it. Maybe more like a something like an Ian Paice kind of guy, or maybe a little bit like what's his name from Trapeze, who then went on to Judas Priest, Dave Holland, not the jazz bass player. A little bit that neighborhood, but still very well suited to Budgie, but they kind of changed the music. So this record is more metallic, both from the guitar perspective and the drum perspective, and subsequently or consecutively, the bass kind of follows. So this is not so much to my taste, but all in all, great record, breaking all the house rules, great songs. It's more riffy song than usually. Sleep Away is kind of the quiet song that they do very often. They have a higher pitch in their solo, so the solo is kind of more that screechy, that jump out things like in Whole Lotta Love or in Piece of Mississippi by Hendrix, kind of all of a sudden coming out like a searing solo, very cool. Who Do You Want For Your Love? I Can See My Feelings, that's a great one. I think Maiden covered that on one of their B-sides, or was it I Ain't No Mountain For You To Climb On? And then the end is Napoleon Bonaparte 1 and Part 2, which is also a cool song. So great record all in all, but there are a couple things about it that I don't like that much. And with all their records, slowly I think that the production is starting to improve in, let's just say, general technical terms, but maybe at a certain point it improves too much, as was kind of the bane of many bands and many records. Next up is a very cool record. If I were Britannia, I'd waive the rules. Very cool record. A lot of people say that this is the beginning of their decline, and on the other hand, a lot of people have a feeling that they injected new blood and new ideas in the band, and I tend to favor that idea. This is the first time that they almost openly use kind of jazz-y or jazz-ish themes in the music. The tendency with the bass sort of continues and sort of goes back to like it was in the first three records. So the thumping bass is kind of returns here, becoming a little bit more prominent, and also becomes a little bit more melodic and going a little bit more with the melody rather than just the rhythm and the drums, but definitely not as much as it went in the first couple records. So all in all, a very great record. Of course, it has Black Velvet Stallion that everybody's talk about it, with a long drawn out guitar solo in the middle, and the cool almost AC/DC kind of stop and go with the bass and pushing the riff. Very cool. Heaven Knows Our Name, that's kind of also a quiet earth song. It's not all acoustic, but it has an acoustic part to it. You get Quacked or Bureaucrats, the opening, and again, and Negan, that it's someone's name. So it's the woman's name, Anne, and then her last name is Negan, and it's and again and again. If I Were Britannia, a great song, very, very also kind of like a forward pushing riff, melodic with thumping bass. Very good, good record, great record, and among my all-time favorites. And the follow-up is this. Again, kind of one of these records that a lot of people say that this is the beginning of their downfall.